Joining me now this afternoon at Quips and Clips is Chairman of Congress of Racial Equality, Niger Innis. For the young members of our audience who may not know this organization, it's a civil rights organization from the 1940s. It was founded then, was involved in all of the major civil rights activities of the 1960s. At one point, I believe in the late 60s, it kind of turned to the bent of Black power and separatism. Then 70s and 80s kind of came back toward conservatism. And let's just start there, Niger. Try to explain to our audience the evolution of the Congress of Racial Equality.
Well, as you so articulately stated, Tanya, CORE was started in 1942 by a group of Gandhian disciples, Black and white pacifists. That actually, funny enough, the initial issue for CORE, or the Reconciliation Project, was protesting our involvement in World War II, believe it or not, because these, again, were pacifists. I think we got that one wrong, but it did help just a little bit. It did help organize the organization and establish chapters and establish basically a grassroots network around the country for those who are interested in fighting for justice. And so we quickly moved away from international affairs of World War II to what was happening in our own country, and the fact that, for nearly 100 years, even though Mr. Lincoln and over 300,000 soldiers had fought to make Black Americans free and citizens, that in spite of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, we were still second-class citizens in most of the country, particularly in the South. And so we started to, through nonviolent protests, to challenge segregation and Jim Crow. And that was the dominant issue for CORE in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And then in the, as you again stated, then in the mid to late 60s, not just CORE, but groups like SNCC and other groups started to say, hey, look, this nonviolent turn the other cheekism of the civil rights movement, maybe we need to change. We were greatly influenced by Malcolm X, of course, who left the Nation of Islam to establish a Black nationalist organization. Malcolm, even when he was with the Nation of Islam, did not practice turn the other cheek. He said, if somebody smacks you, you smack them back. I suspect you know a little bit about that with your extracurricular activities, Miss Davis.
Just a tad.
But
Talk about my kung fu again. Yeah.
There we go. So my father, Roy Innis, civil rights icon, helped CORE go through a transition to grasp onto Black power. And interestingly enough, just to fast forward a little bit to the 1980s, when CORE became a little bit of a right of a center or conservative organization, there really is not much distinction between true advocates of Black nationalism or Pan-Africanism and conservatism. You might remember that Marcus Garvey, one of the great Pan-African, I would say the greatest Pan-Africanists, had the United Negro Improvement Association, which is the largest organization of Blacks in the world ever, that he was inspired to come to America in the first place by a guy named Booker T. Washington, who is the cornerstone of Black conservatism. So, obviously there's some differences between a Pan-African Black nationalist focus and conservatism, but essentially doing for self, picking yourself up by your own bootstraps, establishing Black businesses and promoting economic prosperity was kind of like the bond between the two. So as CORE, I wouldn't say changed, but evolved into embrace conservatism in the East to today. There were a lot, the seeds had already been planted during the Black nationalist era.
All right. So fast forward to today. You are a Trump supporter, correct? Mr. Hat will attest to.
As you can see, I've been a Trump supporter since 2016. In fact, I was on the advisory committee, African Americans for Donald Trump, back in 2020. And I continue to have strong relationships with a variety of people throughout the Trump administration. And actually, I've had the opportunity to meet and sit with the president himself on several occasions. And, it's funny. Of course, I'm a supporter of Trump. But people, sometimes say, well, Niger, how could you support that? I'm like, why would I go away from the one candidate, the one president that has embraced America Firstism, which I've been, as you know, since we were in college together, I've been a promoter of America First and that concept and that philosophy, not America alone, not that we're going to put up the drawbridge and pull up the drawbridges and just hope that the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean protects us from the world. I'm not saying that at all. But what we are saying is that, for example, one of the things that President Trump is doing is putting a lot of pressure on the Europeans to do what they're supposed to do according to the NATO guidelines, which will spend up to 2%, at least 2% of their GDP on their own national defense and on supporting NATO. The United States has been pulling the load there. And quite frankly, a lot of our European brothers and sisters have been freeloaders. And so Trump is re-examining that.
Well, you've jumped ahead on me, and you've gone to our full disclaimer that we've known each other for a long time, and I've always heard you talk about America First. Right now, though, I know that you're a friend of Steve Bannon's, correct?
Well, I wouldn't say that we're friends. We know each other. Okay. I've been to his house a couple of times, his house parties, but I wouldn't say that we're going to text each other as soon as this interview is over. Not that kind of friendship.
You share the kind of the populist point of view, right?
I do.
Well.
I think Steve is a little bit more of a sensationalist,
Okay.
He's in media, and this, so a lot of media is how many viewers you have, how many listeners you have. If it's social media, how many clicks you get. And you have to be provocative sometimes and push the envelope. And so I think Steve often pushes the envelope, and quite frankly, even though he is an ally, I think sometimes he pushes the envelope a little bit too far. And, we get a little bit ahead of ourselves on some things. But for the most part, I think we share a similar philosophy.
Okay. Well, one of the ways in which Steve has been kind of pushing the envelope lately has been he's been out front in his opposition at times, I would say, to how Elon Musk is kind of taking over I guess quite a few executive level powers. And my question to you is, does the current kind of slashing of the federal government and freezing of funds, how does that fit with the America First philosophy, when part of the kind of consequences of that are that there are a whole lot of people out of jobs? And there are a whole lot of farmers in the Midwest wondering what's going on, as they have, crops that aren't going anywhere because they used to be going to USAID, et cetera. So tell me where you stand on that. How does that fit?
Well, another branch of the America Firsters, which really isn't necessarily an America First only philosophy, is government accountability, government being responsible with taxpayer dollars. As you probably know, I was one of the Tea Party leaders. And, that was the biggest issue with the Tea Party. In fact, the Tea Party was started by not Rand Paul, the current senator, but his father, Ron Paul, who coined the phrase "he," which is taxed enough already. That is really the genesis of the Tea Party revolution. And so the fact that we have a budget that is out of control. We have a deficit and a national debt, which is going to cripple, the ability for your son, for my nieces and nephews and future generations to really maximize and grab hold of the American dream. According to the Government Accounting Office, the federal government loses between $233 billion to $500 billion due to waste and fraud in the federal government. And so there have been talks. I mean, Al Gore was supposedly, during the Clinton administration, leading the effort to reform government, which really never happened. So hang on. At the end of the Clinton administration, there was a surplus, at least on paper, for the first time in forever. You're no question about it. I don't know that I would give Al Gore the credit for that in terms of his government reforms, but I would give Clinton and Gingrich, Newt Gingrich, the Speaker of the House at the time, that partnership was absolutely spectacular economically in terms of reducing government spending and actually providing us with a surplus. You're absolutely right. Hats off to Clinton. Hats off to his partner, Newt Gingrich, in making that happen. But since then, when my guy came into power, George W. Bush, and 9/11 hit, it's gone out of control. And by the way, out of control among Republicans and Democrats. This is not exclusively a Democrat problem. It's Republicans and Democrats that have had that problem.
The largest boost in that deficit came when?
President Trump, his first term, 2017 to 2021. I hear you, but what do they say?
But here's the thing, though.
Doctor,
let me stop
cure
you for
thyself.
a second, yeah, right, exactly. Here's the thing, though. I mean, I hear what you're saying about how much government spends. There's no question that getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse has been, our entire lifetimes. They've been talking about that. I get it. But the indiscriminate way in which it's being done, the kind of just slash and burn, where do you come down on that? You're all right with that?
Well, I think some of these bureaucracies are so deeply embedded in the status quo of government life that there are all kinds of presumptions that administrations have made and just allowed to pass. And so I think that, when you're dealing with something that has taken root since FDR, even under Reagan, the greatest conservative president we've ever had, even under Reagan, government spending went up. And it wasn't just in the Defense Department,
Right.
And that's because these institutions, I think Mark Levin calls it the bureaucratic state, and it's almost like a fifth branch of government all on its own. And so Musk is doing the hard thing, and he's pulling it out root and branch. And there's no doubt that some people are going to get hurt. And I like the fact that, they re-examine the cuts that they've made. They re-examine the contracts that they've ended. But I think for the most part, it's a good thing. It's funny. The AP came out with a story, I think it was just yesterday, saying that of the thousands of government contracts that DOGE has canceled, only 40%, 40% will not save the government any money. Because if you read deeper into the story, what it says is that these contracts, really, the money has already been spent. So you can't get the money back because the money has already been spent. And what the only process left with those contracts is get the goods and services that you already paid for. But it seems backward. The headline is backward. It's not that only 40% will save the government money. It's that 60% will save the government some money, and that is a good thing. And by the way, I'm as much of a hawk promoter of the U.S. national defense and the Pentagon and our brave soldiers, men and women all around the world that protect our freedoms. But the Pentagon is a little bloated too.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that
that's a big problem.
Yeah, I think that Hegseth said that he plans to cut of discretionary spending a good 8% or $50 billion out of the Pentagon's budget. That is fantastic news. That's good stuff.
Well, we'll see what happens. But since we've jumped ahead to the Pentagon, let's talk about the personnel changes, and let's talk about how. I got to ask you, as the chairman of CORE, how are you feeling about the elimination, the eradication of DEI programs, and I would say probably a misinterpretation of what they're all supposed to be about anyway, and the having actually.
I'm back.
Okay. Yep. I saw that. But also having fired, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the top Navy officer, the JAG officers, which is, I think, a very big deal because, They're the ones in charge of the military code of conduct and all those
Sure.
laws. And how are you feeling about that? You think that
Well,
that's yeah?
okay, I would separate DEI
I was about to say I asked you
from,
three questions at once. Go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, yeah. And you're talking to the right person, because my father was one of the founding fathers of the original concept of affirmative action. And what the original concept of affirmative action was not some, forgive the liberals that are listening to or the progressives that are listening to the program, but this progressive potpourri, every progressive cause, being thrown into the loop. It was to address 100 years of second-class citizenship
Right.
of Black Americans.
Right.
Yet, if you look at any analysis of affirmative action programs or DEI programs, the biggest beneficiaries of DEI have been who? White women.
White women. Yes, that's true.
Right? I mean, we get the blame for it. Black Americans get the blame for it. But the biggest beneficiaries by far of affirmative action has been white women. And what I would
But listen
argue,
to what you just said. I agree with you. But listen to what you just said. We get the blame for it. So even though it's white women are the biggest beneficiaries, the clearest way to look like you're actually doing something with DEI is to get rid of the people of color. It's not to get rid of the white women, right?
Right. That's
That's
what.
problem.
Well, although, and your situation, and this is segue to your other question, which was, how do I feel about the Joint Chiefs of Staff chairman and the Navy officer who happens to be a white woman,
right? Exactly.
being fired? Look, I think that is sensational, but the reality is there are two reasons that the president decided to make those moves. Number one, apparently the Joint Chiefs of Staff chairman, I consider him a hero and he's a decent man, but he apparently was highly critical of President Trump over the last several years, and a president has the right to have among his stable the team of people that are not necessarily loyal to him personally, but loyal to his
That's what
particular
he's asking
agenda.
for.
Well,
Yeah.
he's asking for those who are loyal to his agenda. And apparently, both of these officers were not hired by DEI, but they were advocates of the DEI gospel. And they made the military, which is supposed to be an operation that kills, that goes out.
My understanding
Yeah.
is that was a Biden administration directive that effectively they were doing what their commander-in-chief wanted them to do, and they just got fired for it by the new commander-in-chief.
That's a fair point. And if that is the case, it is a tragedy, okay?
Yeah.
That they got fired because of that. Having said that, though, if in any way, shape, and form they adopted the philosophy, and of course, you and I are not mind readers, so we don't know what they deep down believe, but, the original concept of affirmative action was to deal with the discrepancy of Black Americans for 100 years. It has evolved into all kinds of things. In fact, what I say, Tanya, is that it's trickle-down social policy, because affirmative action benefits those who are socioeconomically at the elite. White women, upper middle class, Black and Hispanics, or LGBTQ. It does nothing to that little kid in Harlem or Bed-Stuy or East LA that is busting their butt, flipping hamburgers at McDonald's during the evening and trying to bust his butt in a broken down public school during the day. It did relatively little proportionately for that type of individual, and it rewarded a lot of elites within these various specialty minority groups to benefit from it.
The same argument was made about affirmative action too, though. I mean, and by the way, DEI is more of what came out of, the summer of 2020 and,
George Floyd protests.
George Floyd protests. But the same argument was made about affirmative action, that essentially people like you and me, people who were already like very much into education, who were probably, the scholarship kids, it helped us, and it might not have helped, like you said, the people who were flipping hamburgers. So I get your argument. It's the same. It's the same in whether it's affirmative action or DEI, but it did help people, and it
No, no,
continued to
no
help
doubt.
people. You
And you're
know,
absolutely right. I'll do a full disclosure here. You're absolutely right. You were not a beneficiary of affirmative action at Georgetown, but I was, okay,
mm,
because my grades were not, they were good, but they weren't spectacular. But my
mm,
leadership ability helped Georgetown say, you know what, let's give this kid a shot. And so they put me in a program that was called Community Scholar, okay?
mm,
And what we had to do was come to Georgetown over the summer, right before enrollment, and take several classes, get involved in various activities to strengthen us and prepare us for Georgetown University. But the great thing about the Community Scholars Program is that I
mm.
didn't walk in and just see a bunch of Hispanics and Blacks. My roommate was this white Texan. You know,
Right.
one of my classmates was a kid from Appalachia, kid from
Mhm.
Appalachia,
Right, right,
and
right.
I'm like, wow, this is, if you're going to have affirmative action and you have it based on character and socioeconomic disability, okay,
Mhm.
that's the kind of affirmative action that I can embrace. And so even if the Joint Chiefs of Staff chairman and the female officer that just got fired were
Franchetti.
just following the instructions of President Biden, what they could have done is fine tune the instrument of DEI to make it so that it helps
Do
first
you
and
think that would
foremost.
have saved them when they were
It might
coming
have.
under, and when they're coming under a defense secretary who wrote a book claiming that, everybody needs to be, that it's too woke in the Pentagon, everybody's got to go. I mean, I think for me, I don't want to take up too much time on this because I know that you
Right.
have a certain amount of time, but um, it's also worth mentioning that, especially with the JAG officers that were let go, and with these officers, they're supposed to essentially be not a check on the president, but provide the president with a bigger
Independent
picture,
analysis. Yeah.
independent analysis. They're not supposed to just automatically go along with his agenda. That's why it's a 4-year term that can
Right.
cross administration.
Administrations. Sure.
Is it not
Sure.
bothersome that that's not being adhered to?
Well, see, that's an interesting thing because it goes back to what I was saying. If this African American, highly decorated African American Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman, only the second in American history following
Right.
Colin Powell, okay, if he had pushed back just a little bit against the Biden administration and said, hey, look, I understand what your goals are, and the goals are noble, but we're going about it the wrong way.
Mm.
If he had had one headline pushing back a little bit against the DEI extreme agenda, then that might have saved his job and might have endeared him to head and to Trump.
What was extreme about it? Quickly. You used
Well,
extreme.
yeah, I would say promoting drag shows on military bases all around the country was a little bit extreme and did not do much to, oh yeah, check it out when we finish the
Okay.
interview.
Okay.
The Pentagon was promoting drag shows. I mean, I'm not talking to the tunes of 10,000 of them, but
Yeah.
if it was
Okay.
just a few of them, okay, that's the kind of eyesore that gives a black eye to the whole DEI initiative.
Okay. I'm going to leave that alone.
That'll
Because here's
be
what I,
episode 2.
yeah, exactly. Because I've known you for so long and you've described yourself as a Jack Kemp Republican. And there's a lot about the Trump agenda that is so not in keeping with a Jack Kemp Republican. And I just wonder, like, are you, with what's happening right now, and particularly with like freezing government funds, there seems to be kind of a crossover of, jumping into Article 1 powers, like, constitutional Republicans, constitutional supporters are generally thinking this is probably not a good thing. Like, how does the executive branch have the ability to do what it's doing? Or does that not bother you in any way?
But there's no doubt that the power of the purse, our founding fathers said the power of the purse resides with the Congress.
Right.
No doubt about it. And it's important to say also that Elon Musk his role really is as an advisor. He's not an official member of the executive branch. He's not an official member of the government. He is an advisor that is shining a light on problems with our
And telling
spending.
federal workers to email him what they do in their work week. That is more
Well,
than an advisor.
no doubt he's using the blessing of the president of the United States to hold folk accountable and to say, hey, look, you have a job, but you don't get to keep that job just because you have the job. You get to keep that job if you can show you're being productive. And so I think he's doing what, quite frankly, the advisors should have been doing for quite a long time. Trump got into a lot
Steve
of
Bannon
trouble.
doesn't trust him, do you?
I mean, I think we have to be very careful about the potential conflicts of interest that might occur with his private business and with what's going on in government. But so far, I've not seen anything. I've seen nothing but revelations of problems. You know, for example, you probably heard this already, Stacey Abrams group that she helped found, environmental group, got $200 billion from the Biden administration to promote green energy. And it's like, wait a minute, has that been examined? Are we seeing how that money is being spent? Is it being spent properly? Why was it even awarded to the Stacey Abrams group in the first place?
What's the group? That's a lot of money.
Yeah, but do a quick Google, and I welcome your listeners and viewers to do a quick Google search of Stacey Abrams Environmental Group and $200 billion that they were given by the Biden administration. And that was uncovered due to Musk and Trump's efforts. I think we have to be careful. Like I said, I think we have to be careful with the potential.
Is there anything uncovered that was a Republican group?
Hey, could very well be. I think when we dig into the Pentagon, we could very well find a couple of elephants that are a little fat for their own good.
Yeah. Let's see. So if you're trusting Musk, I don't know. There just seems to be.
As Reagan said to Gorbachev, trust but verify.
But verify, yes. But is there any concern that if they break it, whatever the it is, that it won't be fixable? Like, we haven't been here before.
Yeah.
The country's never been here before. You know?
I hear you. But that is a risk, but I think it is a risk worth taking because the status quo is unsustainable. The status quo of how business has been done in our country for darn near 75 years. Okay. Again, I'm not casting aspersion against Democrats alone. Under Republican and Democrat administrations, this has to be undone and untangled. And by the way, and I don't mean to transition.
Why are you trusting oligarchs to do the undoing of the status quo as a populist? Like, why in the world would the populists trust the oligarchs? I'm just missing this. Explain this to me.
I would look, if it was Jeff Bezos in charge of this or the Facebook kid in charge of this, okay, yeah, I would have real problems. But Musk himself has gone through a transition. Musk used to be a liberal Democrat, and supporter of Democrats,
So the president.
What's that?
So
yeah,
that's
true. That's true too. It's tough to be a New Yorker and be a Republican. Take it from me, okay? You take a lot of lumps. But, so Musk has gone through an evolution himself, and I think he has proven where he put his money, where he put his mouth, where he put his agenda, that he has embraced the populist American First agenda. And so, and by the way, sometimes...
Niger! The man is not even, it's just, okay, here are the numbers slash. That is not, he is not acting like somebody who is empathetically caring about the jobs that he's cutting. Explain this to me. Where are you seeing this populism?
Where you would say that it's slash, I would say that he's pulling out the roots, both pre and brand. And he is, and I was going to say before that the government is such a huge entity. You might call it a big dog. Maybe it takes a big dog like Elon Musk to be able to, on behalf of his president and the American people that elected him, to challenge this monstrosity, this leviathan that is the federal government bureaucracy. And have some people unfairly been hurt? Are there going to be some people that have been unfairly hurt? I think the answer to that is yes. But I do think that these changes are not necessarily permanent. They can be refined. In fact, I think Musk and Trump have already refined some. They rehired some of the people that were let go recently. So look, there's going to be errors made. There are going to be mistakes made. As long as these guys are completely transparent with what they're doing and why they're doing it, if a mistake has been made, I think it can be corrected. But the change has to get done.
Do you believe that they're going to adhere to court orders?
Yeah, I think ultimately. I mean, ultimately, President Trump did leave the White House in 2021, ultimately.
Kicking and screaming, but yeah.
but I think they will. Look, we have 3 branches of government and they all be respected, including the judicial.
Right. Also, all right, moving on, as chairman of CORE, your party's full of a lot of white supremacists these days. How are you feeling about that?
Well, I would distinguish between white supremacists and American nationalists. Okay. I'm an American nationalist. Okay. But I'm an American nationalist that is quite distinctive.
You're not a white nationalist.
No, I'm not a white nationalist. Far from it. Even though I've got roots in black nationalism, I'm not necessarily a black nationalist either. I'm an American nationalist. And the beauty of American nationalism is that it is based, or at least it should be based, not on the classic blood and soil of nationalism in the past, It is based on an affection for your fellow Americans, an affection and reverence of our United States Constitution. And in that sense, anybody, any color, creed, sexual orientation, gender, can be an American nationalist and be a part of the American family. And so I would say that a lot of those that are labeled white nationalists or white supremacists are actually American nationalists and just want to expose and roll back some of the excesses of progressivism.
Okay, all right.
Now, but to go to your point though, okay?
Yeah.
I think white supremacists, okay, that have wedded themselves to the MAGA movement or the America First agenda actually undermine the movement because they give progressive critics all the ammunition that they need to try to shoot us down. So I think they undermine us. So I like the fact that Nick Fuentes is now denouncing Trump. He's not supporting Trump as he has in the past.
Trump's not denouncing them. Why isn't the president denouncing because he knows he's their man. They've made it really clear. Why doesn't he say something against that?
Let's rewind to Charlottesville. If you look at the tape that progressives love to play is that little snippet where Trump says, they're good people on both sides. But if you expand the time that he's speaking, he actually said, I have no tolerance for white supremacists, for white racists. They are not a part of this agenda. That's not who I'm talking about here. I'm talking about decent people on both. And he said it in the tape. But a lot of progressives.
That's 2017. I'm talking about today. I'm talking about the white supremacists today who were like, that's our guy. And he's fine with that. At least he doesn't say anything against it.
Well,
so.
You know what it is? I say that the importance of, and this is the underbelly, this is how the sausage gets made. It can look ugly sometimes of American politics. But I would say just like FDR had convenient, cozy relationships with white segregationists, real white supremacists, okay? That they didn't just talk a game, they implemented law and prevented the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment from being exercised by their own citizens, even though they got credit population-wise for their black citizens in these deep southern states. which led them to have an inordinate amount of power in Congress. The number
That's a
of
very
Southern
different time in the country. Let's
no
let's at least bring it to within our
no
lifetime. Bring it to post
but
65.
well, the thing is, politics is an addition game, or at least it should be when it's practiced
Mhm.
wisely. It's not about subtraction. Okay, Trump should not go and find every bad entity that supports him and say, you're not welcome here. What he should do is promote his agenda that is an American nationalist, an America first agenda. And those that support that, they're on the train. As long as the agenda is being promoted, as long as it is manifesting itself the way it's supposed to and living up to its own ideals, look, the fact that some bigot, supports Trump, we can survive that because I think the overwhelming majority of supporters of President Trump and supporters of this agenda, what was it? Some 70 million Americans that voted for this guy. I think the overwhelming majority are not white supremacist bigots. They may be American nationalists. They may not be politically correct, but they are not bigots and racists.
Trump's former FBI director said the greatest domestic threat are white supremacists. The greatest domestic threat. That was Christopher Wray. That was a year and a half ago.
I'm not a criminal justice expert, but I think that was bullshit. I think that was the
Really?
FBI director being politically correct. When is the last?
Really?
I mean, I really believe that.
But the rise in white supremacists in this country started with the election of Barack Obama. Like, that should make perfect sense. That the first black president would suddenly make all these white supremacist groups come out of the woodwork.
No. Remember Ruby Ridge? Remember, the blowing up of the building in Oklahoma, during the Clinton administration?
Right.
There was no black president there. There was a white president.
Yes, but you're talking individuals. I'm talking about the rise of groups like the Proud Boys, groups like the Oath Keepers. These people were not...
Slow your roll there. It's hard for me to say the Proud Boys, which is led by an Afro-Latino, Enrique Torres, okay?
Yeah.
It's a white organization. I mean, what you can say, again, you have to make a distinction because I think a lot of progressives, and, look, they're honest. Julie Waginski, who I'm sure you've seen before, she's a buddy of mine, okay? And we have this argument all the time. She says, no, don't be a nationalist because that leads to anti-Semitism, that leads to racism. And I'm like, no, it doesn't have to. An American nationalism that has faith and belief and a reference in our United States Constitution and opens it up for anybody that believes the same is not a racist and a bigot. But there are a lot of progressives that automatically say, if you promote an America First agenda, you are a white nationalist.
No,
I mean, how many Republicans
I'm
over
not
the years?
saying that.
No, I know you're not. No, I know you're not.
Yeah. Okay.
But with the Proud Boys, I have, when I ran for Congress in 2014, I went to several Oath Keeper and Proud Boy events. Okay. And there's no confusion how black I am. And a lot of these guys were embracing the agenda that I was pushing forward. In fact, I would argue, they were the backbone of my supporters when I fought that congressional race.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to label these guys racist. And
there's a difference. You have to know that there's a difference between a connection with Black people in your life and espousing a belief in the supremacy of your race. Those are two different things.
I agree.
We could spend an hour talking about this.
No, I agree with you on the supremacy of your race. How about the supremacy of your civilization? What if I were to say, I believe American civilization is exceptional, that we have done more to free more millions of people, take them out of poverty, take them away from totalitarianism than any civilization in the history of the world, going back to ancient Rome or ancient Egypt, for that matter.
Okay.
And because of our Constitution, because we are able to constantly tinker and measure how far we're going, if we're going too far. And because we have the amendments process to our great civic Bible, the Constitution, I would say I believe in American supremacy, American civilizational supremacy. Does that mean that I believe in white supremacy? Of course not.
Of course not. Right. Okay, we'll leave that there. I know that CORE also boasts a long history of assisting immigrants.
Yeah.
I know that CORE played a part in the last major immigration reform in 1986 under Reagan.
Yeah, under Reagan, absolutely.
Yeah. So what are they, is CORE playing a role right now in trying to get immigration reform together? Let's start
Not really. The last time CORE was making a major effort and I would say it's not just immigration, it's immigration and assimilation reform within our country, was during the Obama administration when an immigration reform bill was being pushed by the gang. I think they called it the Gang of Eight or the Gang of Six, including the current Secretary of State at that time, Senator Marco Rubio. We were brought in to advise and and give some degree of direction to the immigration reform agenda. And again, I say it's not just about immigration. The key issue, and by the way, this isn't a problem just in the United States. In fact, less so in the United States than in large parts of Western Europe, a crisis that Western Europe is dealing with right now, which is assimilation. How do you bring in people from another culture, another country, and assimilate them into your thought, into your culture, into reverence for the Constitution? I mean, CORE actually, when our immigration program was operational, we had American civics as a foundation of our program.
Right.
Okay. You come in, learn English.
Nationalized.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. You learn about our Constitution, and you also learn that as a new citizen, you have a responsibility to give back to the country that is given to you. And by the way,
let me stop you there, because I know we're running out of time, because I want to make sure that we get to the fact that where part of the 86 bill, a huge part, the part that, Republicans today are kind of unhappy about, is the amnesty. How are you feeling about the whole thing about the mass deportation of trying to get everybody illegal out?
Well, the thing about that 86 bill is supposed to be one-time amnesty.
Yeah.
Not a perpetual forever amnesty.
Right.
Pull up the gates, let everybody in. No, it was supposed to be a one-shot deal where people that had established lives in the United States, for, in some cases, their entire adult lifetimes, could provide
which
this
is currently
one
true of
time.
a lot of dreamers, right?
True. It was supposed to be a one-time benefit, where you can get amnesty and get forgiven the fact that you broke the law by overstaying your visa or by coming into the country illegally. What has part of that bargain, though, was Republicans gave that, and the Democrats were supposed to give a dramatic kind of like tightening of immigration and making sure that people cannot continue to break the law by overstaying their visa and by coming into the country illegally. Tragically, just the reverse happened. What happened is that amnesty sent the signal to millions of people, and I don't blame these people. They want a better life for their children and for themselves. I get it, but if you don't have borders within a country, you don't have sovereignty. If you don't have sovereignty, you don't have a country. And so that's fundamental. And unfortunately, even though we were part of it in 86, the one era of that fantastic bill was the fact that it did not do enough to promote our borders and promote protection of our sovereignty, which is a critical element, and is what is really driving a lot of people to support what President Trump is doing.
True. But are you in support of the revocation of the temporary status for so many people like Venezuelans and Haitians? Yeah.
Well, see, here's where my philosophies are a little bit at odds with one another, because I'm not only an America firster, I'm an America's firster.
Exactly. You're a Western Hemisphere kind of guy.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm a spiritual grandchild of Monroe, of President Monroe and the Monroe Doctrine. I believe the Western Hemisphere should be interdependent and should have our primary focus national security-wise should be the Western Hemisphere. So the fact that we're rolling back TPS for Haitians that are part of our hemisphere, in fact, the second democracy in our hemisphere, is troublesome to me. The fact that we're rolling back for Venezuelans that are escaping a dictatorial communist regime of Maduro in Venezuela, that troubles me a little bit. And we have to re-examine what it is that we're doing. That might be the one key that I have of the administration's practice. And by the way, I think even the current Secretary of State privately probably has the same type of misgiving.
I'm fairly certain that Rubio agrees with you. So real quick, though, obviously the two big international issues right now, Middle East and Ukraine, especially.
Yes.
I know that you're a Western Hemisphere person, but the NATO alliance, man, how are you feeling about kind of leaving Ukraine out to dry? I mean, hanging them out to dry, it seems like.
I don't know that we're leaving Ukraine out to dry as much as we're saying, okay, we spent how many hundreds of billions of dollars investing in Ukraine? The Europeans have spent how many billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars investing in Ukraine? Right. And at the end of the day, we're exactly the same place that we were back in 2014. Sorry, not 2014, in 2021 or 2022, with essentially Russia having the areas that they have conquered.
Yeah.
And
but
Ukraine
that's better than them having taken over the country, right?
No, I agree. Okay. But I think I think Trump is right when he says if he had been president, I don't know that Vladimir Putin would have tested him the way that he tested Joe Biden. And I think there could have been some degree of a compromise. And I think that's what they're trying to promote now. And look, I don't believe in, letting any ally out in the cold. But I think it's kind of weird to look at a recipient of probably $500 billion of Western largesse and say that they're being left out in the cold. What is happening is we're re-examining the bang for our buck. What is the ROI? What is the return on investment?
That Ukraine is the one who started the war, for God's sake.
I look.
And
the
in
thing
the
about
UN yesterday, he would not. The U.S. voted against the resolution condemning Russia for starting the war. What is happening?
I think they're two distinctive things. Okay, I'll deal with the UN vote in a second. But in terms of Trump, the thing we love about Trump are the things that we have misgivings about Trump too, is that anything that comes to his head is not left in his head alone. He asserts and communicates his process while he's going through. But most times he's crazy like a fox. Okay, he's doing it to manipulate the situation, to shake things up. By the way, I think that's what he's trying to do with Gaza as well, saying that the status quo is not working. We need to do something radically different to change
should
the
U.S.
dynamic.
take over Gaza?
Should the U.S. take over Gaza? No.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear on that.
But the U.S. should not continue. What do they say the definition of insanity is? Doing the same failed thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result. That's what we've been doing for 70 years in the Middle East, for the most, and we have to change the dynamics. We have to give the Palestinian people a hopeful vision that contrasts with them, from the river to the sea, wiping Israel off the map mentality that too many of them have.
That's not necessarily what that means, though. That depends on who you're talking to. You know that, right?
Well, yeah, but
because there are a lot of people for whom that simply means living together in peace, as opposed to Israel being in control of the whole country. So, there's people who mean,
Well, yeah, I think some people look. There's soft anti-Israel folk and hard anti-Israel folk. The hard anti-Israel folk mean river to the sea. Israelis have a place in the West Bank. It's called the Jordan River. or the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, those are the hardcore Hamas loving types. But I
Right,
think there's
right.
a larger group that when they talk about river to the sea, they say, all right, if you don't want to have a two-state solution, let's have a one-state solution where we're all citizens of the same
Exactly.
nation, and one man, one vote, which is just another way of unplugging the Israeli state. Look, I'm a Zionist in the sense that I believe that the Jewish people have the right to self-determination and to have a state that is Jewish. Okay.
Hmm.
If you were to have a one-state solution and one man, one vote solution, Israel would cease to exist as the type of country that it was founded to be.
On that note, we are going to have a part two. I hope you'll
I
come
know
back.
this was
Right.
fun. Great questions and great pushback. Thank you for the opportunity.
You bet. Thank you for joining me.